Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings, Florida over a century ago. These are stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So kick back and enjoy as I share with you a few of the stories from the September 5th, 1919 edition. The formation of a $500,000 corporation to be known as the Ritter Self-Fastening Containers Company is a big thing that all of St. Johns County is interested in. J.R. Ritter of Hastings, inventor of the self-fastening crate, known as the Ritter Self-Fastening Container, has secured his patent, and patent is now being applied for in Mexico and Canada. Mr. Ritter received several flattering offers for the sale outright of his patent rights, but those have all been refused, the inventor preferring to keep the matter of the manufacture and sale of these crates under his control. It is the purpose of the company to establish a mill in this territory, and then to sell the rights to manufacture in many different places. Many persons who are conversant with the needs of the fruit and vegetable market have unqualifiedly recommended the self-fastening container as a crate. It can be easily manufactured and in great quantities can be shipped knocked down to fruit and vegetable growers who will have no difficulty whatever in fitting the parts together without the use of a single nail, screw, or tools in such a way as to render the container practically indestructible. It can be used over and over again. And this is a great advantage, for with advanced prices on timber of all kinds and with the vast quantities being used, conservation of lumber interests demands something of this sort. Many prominent men throughout the county have signified their intention of buying stock in this concern. Motorists who have come up from all points down the East Coast during the last day or two tell amazing stories of the experiences of those who attempt to get through the new route of the Dixie Highway from the Knox and Beatty Grove at Bulow south toward the Tomoka River on the west side of the Halifax. The Volusia commissioners have had road gangs at work doing some emergency shell paving in the ruts, but the traffic is so heavy that the improvement does not amount to very much, and it is understood the decision has now been reached by the Volusia commissioners to go ahead and complete with permanent paving this unfinished 3-mile stretch. In fact, road rollers and other road-building machinery were noticed on the ground on Saturday, and it was thought that the paving operations would begin in earnest at an early date. As many as 7 and 8 machines at a time have been stalled in the sand. At this point, only those who know how to handle automobiles in heavy sand being successful in getting through without assistance. Many purebred hogs are raised in St. Johns County. Hog raising in St. Johns County has assumed large proportions and promises to grow until this is one of the leading hog-producing counties of the state. Very little time or expense is wasted on the Piney Woods Razorback, only fine stock being handled by the farmers. There are few large droves of hogs, but in every section of the county, a few hogs are found on practically every farm. The past summer has been a trying one, as cholera was in evidence in all parts of the county, and swine that had not been treated with serum succumbed to the disease. The disease has not yet been stamped out, and it is still taking toll. Mr. Lord, county agent, has during the few months he has been here inoculated about 3,000 head, and he is satisfied that he has not treated even half of the hogs in the county. Hastings will be honored for Liberty Loan work. It is now possible to make known that Hastings will have a steamship named after her, which will be launched in the very near future. The ship, number 973, will be of the ocean-going type and is being built in some yard unknown at present. As soon as the sponsor is named and Mr. Case, the local chairman of the Liberty Loan Committee, is able to get in direct communication with Mr. Massengale, the date will be set for the launching. This is a high honor for Hastings. It is hoped the ship is in a yard that is not far away so that Hastings may be able to be well represented. Auto went into ditch, result of speeding. While en route to this city from Jacksonville yesterday afternoon, Robert Ranson witnessed an ugly auto spill in which the occupants had an almost miraculous escape from death. Mr. Ranson was in an auto with a friend from Fernandina, and something went wrong with the mechanism when they were near Loretto, stalling them there for several hours. The rain was pouring in torrents and they were soaked to the skin. Suddenly, a Buick car swung around the curve, moving at terrific speed, and the driver was almost upon the stalled car before he saw it. In attempting to avoid the collision, he swung the Buick car across the road, and it skidded some distance, then took a header into the ditch, pinning the occupants, a man and two ladies, beneath it. The ladies screamed in terror, but they were unable to escape from their predicament. Mr. Ranson and his friend hastened to the rescue and by desperate effort succeeded in liberating the victims of the accident. They had all been securely caught beneath the car and could have never extricated themselves. Fortunately, they sustained no injuries, but the car was badly smashed. They boarded a passing auto and returned to Jacksonville. Reckless driving at high speed around a curve was responsible for the accident. Auto semaphore signal. H.A. Pillars is displaying on his car the first semaphore safety signal seen in St. Augustine. It is a guide for cars approaching from the rear. The driver, by touching different buttons, elevates a sign indicating his intention of stopping, turning to the right or left, and other information. Mr. Pillars has introduced this signal system here and has taken the agency for it in this county. It will prevent many accidents and will no doubt be generally adopted. Semaphore signals were also called trafficators. Different ones worked in varying ways in the early 1900s, but overall, when a button was pushed or a lever was pulled, a flag or sign would pop out from the body of the vehicle, usually near the door pillar. The signal flag resembled that of the semaphore signal arm used by the railroads in the 1800s. It was just shorter so it could fold down flush into the car frame when not being used. Over time, these signals would evolve to the turn signals we know today. Many soldiers called up in World War I were still making their way home after the ending of the war, and notice of their return was often noted in articles in the Herald. Here are a few of them. Home for good. James Goodwin returned home last Sunday honorably discharged after spending about 22 months in the Army, most of that time being in France and Germany. He and Walter Kaiser enlisted together and were discharged about the same time. He has been in the roughest part of the fight and says it was not so bad even at the worst, but that the next army he will enlist in will probably be the Salvation Army or one in which he will not have to carry a gun. Jim says it does him good to receive mail as Mr. instead of Corporal. A large circle of friends are glad to greet him, and from all indications, he's glad to be here. Home from AEF. Walter Kaiser, brother of Bob, Fred, and Johnny Kaiser, has returned home after his stay of about 22 months in the service of Uncle Sam. In his Army experience, he has been over practically all the foreign battlefields and has seen the fight to the finish. He can tell some very interesting stories, but says he would not like to go over the same old grounds again and take the chances he once has taken. Walter enlisted at the beginning and was one of the first to go over. His many friends are glad to greet him back, and he says he is more than glad to be home again. The Hastings Herald had more than stories you'd find in modern newspapers, but also local notices that were more of a social report, a way to know what was going on in town and in the personal lives of residents. Here are a few from this edition. To work in Palatka. His many friends will be sorry to hear of the departure of our old friend Joe Harrell. He recently decided to take a position with the Browning Fernside Company of Palatka as accountant and will move to the Gem City. Every inducement has been offered to keep him here, but all seems in vain. Joe promises to come over and see us often and that he will not leave us for good. He'll go to Palatka Monday. Spent weekend. George Sperry took a notion last week that he should have a little vacation and outing and decided to go to Tampa for a few days just to satisfy himself. He returned Thursday via rail, and George says Tampa sure does look good now. Off to school. Miss Mary Lou Brown left last Sunday for Atlanta, where she will attend Lanier University. There she will take up a business course and finish in about 6 or 8 weeks. New stock arrived. Miss Kate Lucas, one of the up-to-date milliners of Palatka, has just returned from New York markets where she obtained some exceptionally good bargains and is showing the latest styles. She is now arranging for a grand opening, which will be announced later. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Morello, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. And to wrap up this week in Hastings Headline History, how about a tune from the time? A 1919 hit, Billy Murray's Take your girlie to the movies if you can't make love at home.
Beatrice Fairfax gives advice to anyone in love. That's why Johnny Gray wrote to her one day, when I call to love my girl, her folks are always there. That's why I'm blue, now what shall I do? And Beatrice said never despair. Just take your girlie to the movies if you can't make love at home. There's no little brother there who always squeals. You can say an awful lot in 7 reels. Take your lesson at the movies and have love scenes of your own. Though she's just a simple little ribbon flirt, close your eyes and think you're kissing Billy Bird. Take your girlie to the movies if you can't make love at home. Sweethearts always used to spoon in a big Morris chair. Young folks of today have a different way. Far away from cranky dad and mother's eagle eye. It's lots of fun, here's how it's done, so come on and give it a try. Take your girlie to the movies if you can't make love at home. Find a cozy corner where it's nice and dark. Don't catch influenza kissing in the park. Take your tip from Douglas Fairbanks and have love scenes of your own. Going to your seat, you've got a dandy chance. You can shine your shoes on someone else's pants. Take your girlie to the movies if you can't make love